Happy Halloween to those who celebrate it. I am dressed up currently as a college student, and I expect I'll be dressed up as a college student again tomorrow. What do you know? For today's video, we'll discuss what exactly the phrases GPU bound and CPU bound mean in regards to video games. It's a question often asked by those who build their own computers. After assembling a list of parts, one typically decides in the back of his or her mind which component will be the limiting factor, either the graphics card or central processing unit. That is, after all, what being bound means. This term is unique because unlike fixed parameters, it changes with respect to in-game settings. Games that run at very low resolutions and high frame rates will usually result in CPU bound scenarios, and titles run at high resolutions and lower frame rates, their trade-offs, will typically be GPU bound by nature of their architectures. More on that here, but how would you go about assessing your own personal situation? How would you properly diagnose whether your GPU or your CPU is holding you back? Welcome to the Crash Course playlist. Without sugarcoating anything or dragging this video out, there is one surefire way of determining whether or not your CPU or GPU is the limiting factor. Download a program like MSI Afterburner or NZXT's CAM software and enable both GPU and CPU percent usages in their drop-down menus. Step-by-step guides on how to do this are linked in this video's description. Whenever you open a game with these presets, you should be able to see them in some corner of your screen, usually the top left. I've simulated 3 different examples with my own personal rig, Walter White version 2.0. It's sporting an i7-6900K octa-core processor at 4.4 GHz, 16 GB of DDR4, and 2 GTX 1070s boosted to 1820 MHz in SLI. From just hearing these specifications, which segment of my computer do you expect will be the limiting factor? Again, it all depends on the game. Here is our first scenario. This is Witcher 3, running in the 1440p resolution at max settings across the board. The game looks beautiful with everything on, and according to our frame rate, my apologies for the unnecessary overlap, is well above the 60 FPS threshold. Ignore these though, these are inaccurate, but do take a look at our CPU and GPU usages. First and foremost, we notice that both graphics cards are being heavily utilized, staying well above 90% for both. This is typically an indication of being GPU bound. Our CPU usage verifies this. It's only utilizing 1/5 of its full processing potential and isn't even getting very hot. With this game, without a doubt, we're being bound by our graphics cards. Even though we have 2 GTX 1070s in here, they're essentially being choked, used to their fullest potentials. For a game like this, jumping from 2 1070s to 2 1080s would be the ideal thing to do given how much CPU headroom we appear to have. That on top of the fact that most games won't fully take advantage of anything more than about 4 physical cores. But there are cases in which the i7-6900K, that's right folks, a $1,000 processor, is the bottleneck. Can you guess which game I'm referring to in particular? Try Cities Skylines, notorious for its aggressive demand of CPU horsepower. It'll choke the life out of any situation when dense populations and heavy mods are in effect, which is the case here. Just check out our frame rates. Are you kidding me? Sure, we're running max settings in 1440p, but this is a $2,500 computer, and I can't even push above 60 FPS? What garbage is this? It's called poor optimization for one. Have a peek at our second GPU usage. It hasn't even passed 10% since the start of this run. This tells me that Cities isn't SLI optimized and is essentially ignoring the second graphics card. Big waste of money in this case. But wait, Greg, how can you say this is a CPU-bound title if it's only being stressed to around 30%? There are 2 reasons for this actually. Keep in mind, this one here's for overall CPU usage. It's basically an average of all CPU utilization. In the case of Witcher 3, all cores were moderately used, but in the case of Cities Skylines, 3 cores are being stressed to the max, while the other 5 sit at bay. Hyperthreading does help in this game, as I've proven here, but it doesn't change the game's architecture. This can be verified by MSI Afterburner's Control Hub, which monitors independent core usage. I know 3 is a weird number, but that's what we're getting here. So our CPU is being maxed out, but only on a few cores. This is entirely dependent on the game's API encoding. The other way to verify that we are in fact CPU bound, take a look at GPU 1's usage. Whether we're zoomed in or out, it doesn't really matter. GPU 1 rarely exceeds 50%, while GPU 2 is practically non-existent. This is typically indicative of a limiting CPU, whether it be the result of a CPU itself or the game's architecture. No matter what I do or where I hover in this game, I'm being bound by my central processing unit. This may be a $1,000 chip, but it isn't being used to its full potential. An i7-6700K, while less than half the cost of the 6900K, would be more ideal here since that CPU still packs enough enough cores to be fully utilized, but with higher individual core performance. Of course, using a more powerful GTX 1080 singular would also help our frame rate here. Okay, so you've seen what a GPU-bound scenario looks like, or GPUs in this case, and you've also seen what a CPU-bound scenario looks like. But is there a middle ground? Can you find a good balance between GPU and CPU usage in any given game? To be fair, you'll always be bound by one or the other. There is no such thing as a perfectly balanced system. With that said, however, when the two work together in harmony, you'll see your frame rates increase as well as overall smoothness. Stuttering should be non-existent, and frame rates should be constant and high with respect to your native gaming resolution. In comes Dying Light. While this one undoubtedly favors NVIDIA graphics cards, the developers made no secret of that, just look at their intro, it plays very well on Walter White version 2.0. Check out our usages. Both GPU 1 and GPU 2 are being utilized about the same, this is good, indicating excellent SLI optimization, and CPU usage often pegs above 50%. I don't expect Dying Light to utilize all 8 cores and 16 threads of the 6900K, that would be a bit crazy, but 50 to 60% usage tells me that it's actively using the industry standard, and that's 4 physical cores for modern gaming. While I would normally consider this a CPU-bound title for the simple reason that replacing my 6900K with my 6700K yields slightly higher frame rates thanks to higher single-core performance, our graphics card utilization is still relatively high, indicating a healthy balance between the two departments. When it comes to selecting parts for your new gaming PC, ask yourself what kinds of games you intend to play, do a bit of research into what those games generally leverage more, either the central processing unit or graphics card, and base your component choices on that. Obviously, it wouldn't make any sense to pair an i3-6100 with a Pascal Titan X. I really hope you didn't do that. You'll likely be CPU bound in almost every game at every standard resolution, but the difference between an i5-6400 plus RX 480 and an i3-6100 plus GTX 1070 in terms of frame rates will certainly vary from game to game. Doing this research beforehand could save you a heck of a lot of buyer's remorse, as well as just pure, sheer frustration. City Skylines, I am looking at you. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Give it a thumbs down if you do feel the complete opposite, or if you hate everything but life, be sure to click subscribe and if you haven't already, stay tuned for more content like this. This is Salazar Studio. Have a safe and happy Halloween.